Today we're redesigning LinkedIn. And I know what you're saying. You're typing up a little comment. Mark, you've already redesigned LinkedIn. Stop. To this date, it is my best performing video. I don't know why. My previous LinkedIn redesign sucked. So we're gonna do it again. But this time we're gonna redesign the profile page. Now there's nothing crazy wrong with the existing UI for the profile page. There's just a couple of alignment issues throughout the site, lots of little things that need to be polished up. And this sidebar is kind of odd. It seems out of place. I feel like the profile page should feature the user, but my attention is split between the user and the sidebar. There's also just a lot of untidiness generally throughout this whole profile page. There's alignment, spacing, and hierarchy issues just riddled throughout this entire UI. We're gonna keep most of the colors the same. The typography we're gonna modernize. That'll make a really big impact. And I want to go for like a professional, clean kind of corporate feel, as opposed to the nice, friendly feel they have with these rounded buttons, because I think that'll give off a much more professional vibe. And I just want to see if I can do it. So let's get going and see what we can do. Okay? Okay. As always, we're going to start with the site navigation and layout containers. I like to spend the majority of my time in these redesigns on the important decisions, and navigation and layout is really important. Because if things aren't in the right place, fundamentally people are going to have a harder time finding them, and if they can't find them, they can't use them. Now the existing UI has icon navigation in the header like this, and I think this looks a little bit clunky, but it also really limits the amount of links they can put here. So I'm gonna move them to a more modern sidebar navigation where they have a lot more room to add more potential avenues of engagement in LinkedIn. And then it should hopefully make everything feel a little bit more clean. Okay, this is pretty basic so far. I want to add a little bit more flair and a little bit more functionality. First of all, the LinkedIn logo is pulling a lot of visual attention. I might just get rid of this later. When people are on LinkedIn, they generally know they're on LinkedIn. It's kind of hard to forget that you're there when you navigate to LinkedIn. So it might not be necessary. I also want to add the ability to create some new content on LinkedIn. For instance, if you want to create a new post or something. I want to add a persistent button here, and then I want to give users a way to swap between lots of different potential profiles. I know I have a couple of profiles on LinkedIn, my personal account, business account, other company accounts, so that seems to make sense to go in here somewhere as well. So that's what I'll be working on next. Seems to be working quite well, but this new post button is pulling a lot of visual attention. And I mean, that makes sense. It's a darkly saturated button on a white background, and it's the primary action whenever you're on LinkedIn. We want to encourage content creators to create more content. That's what keeps it's the lifeblood of the platform. But I don't think we need to be constantly commanding attention here. So I'm gonna try and subdue this a little bit, and then we'll probably move on to the profile itself and come back to the navigation if that makes sense later. I'm just gonna say this is fine for now, and we'll reevaluate the visual hierarchy once we have the rest of the hierarchy in place, the main content, and see how it performs then. As we're moving on to the main area here, I want to underscore that I'm being very intentional with my use of shadows and color here. So we've got the sidebar, which has a very subtle drop shadow. You can see it here, kind of implying that it's floating above the content below it, which often kind of implies a parent-child relationship. And that makes sense in this context because the navigation controls what appears in the content body. But we've also got this nice gray background here, which visually separates the navigation from the body itself, and then the white container gives us the ability to constrain the container width to a very specific dimension and gets us away from the problem of constantly expanding container width for very large screens in a really natural, organic way. That's the heuristic I'm following, and we'll see if it works. I don't think we're necessarily going to be changing too much about the visual hierarchy here. I quite like this, and it makes a lot of visual sense, this card specifically. So I think we're going to persist a lot of that, but just square everything up a little bit so it has that nice, clean, professional feel, and then tidy up the alignment and spacing just a touch. If you ever want to add a treatment like this where you're stacking lots of very colorful and random elements on top of each other, but they need to be next to each other, generally speaking, adding a nice thick border that matches the background color of that element tends to give you the space to do that, right? These are all very different colors. And of course, it's three dudes, right? But they're all taken in different perspectives, and there's lots of different colors in the images, but they look quite well together because they're tightly stacked, but also separated by that nice white space. So whenever I need to do something like this, I'm always leaning on this design pattern of just using a thick stroke that matches the background color, tends to get you most of the way there. I think this works really well, and this is kind of how they have it in the existing UI as well, right? But what it doesn't tell you is like all of the experience behind this. So especially for people that are very late in their career, this might look a little bit underwhelming. So I'm going to put a simple little piece of text below this that indicates that there's a lot more experience behind this that users can click into and learn a little bit more about. It'll also help us deal with all of this white space here. White space isn't necessarily a problem, but it can make your UI look unbalanced if there's too much of it on one side and it's unintentional. Alright, I think this works well for now. This is a good hero card for the profile page. Kind of gives me all the metadata I need about this person to make a decision as to whether or not I want to engage with them further. But now I want to break it down into other sections, similar to how they have this on the existing UI. I want to give people with LinkedIn profiles a featured section to showcase any like paid products they have or interesting posts, show their activity feed, a little about us. And I'm also going to bring the sidebar back in. So let's start building that out now. Okay, I like this card. I think this will be a good way to like break up all the individual elements that we want to share about this user. I also want to add a basic details section, or just kind of add some kind of structure here. Instead of just outputting a bunch of text, I want to be able to list details. So we have some kind of details up here already. But I want to add like way more details, things like contact information and anything else that would kind of make sense to show in a place like LinkedIn in a structured way. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And I'm suspicious that the solution here, given the UI that I've presented myself, is going to look something like label value, with the label being constrained to a specific fixed width so that it looks nice and organized without the need for any like harsh lines or anything. Okay, this is going quite well so far. I do want to use a little more of this space in here. Like I want to add a featured block where I can just add more customization as someone that uses LinkedIn to get new clients. It's important that I can kind of add like free offers and services in here. But that's going to be quite involved. I'm really enjoying the flow that I'm in building out these cards. So the next one I'm going to build is going to be a job history or like work history, because I think that's a really easy way to add like more structure to this UI in like a simple, intuitive way that doesn't require any big brain activity. So gonna do that next. Nice. I really like how this turned out. If I saw something like this on LinkedIn, it would be very clear to me kind of this person's trajectory. right? This is very kind of organic. Here's how they do it on LinkedIn. I mean, it looks really similar, but I think the visual hierarchy here is much more clear, right? Like, I don't necessarily care about where I did this thing. I just want to know, like, what did you do? Where did you do it? When did you do it? And then if I want more detail, I can expand and get that detail. And then of course, for very experienced folks late in their career, we don't want to flood the card with tons and tons of items. We just give the user a means to expand them if they're interested. So this is really nice. I'm going to put this little people you may know card here as well. And then we'll go back up and do the featured area. I think that will be enough to build a really solid LinkedIn profile card. All right, nice. I think this looks really clean, and there's like a very consistent call to action that doesn't pull too much visual attention. Now I'm going to implement the activity feeds, and similar to how they have these bubbles, I'm just going to have secondary navigation. The heuristic they're using is the tag heuristic. So anything that is tagged post or comment should show up. It kind of works, but really you're completely switching context from viewing one type of content to another, posts, comments, images. So I'm going to implement that as secondary navigation and see how it goes. Okay, I think that's a pretty awesome activity feed where I can see like a little bit of everything. It's very clear that these are posts and these are comments. There's much less engagement. There's a thumbnail title for the posts, not so much for the comments. The information hierarchy is also very clean and clear. And again, we try not to overwhelm the user and give them the option to see all of their activity if they'd like to just expressively browse that. So I think this is solid for now. I'm gonna go back to the top and add in a featured section here, and then we should be just about done. All right, I think we're almost there. A couple of things I want to tweak. I added the explore option over here for searching LinkedIn, but I feel like search is still kind of fundamental to LinkedIn. So I'm also going to add it in the header somewhere. And then lastly, I think I'm going to polish up the visual hierarchy over here because it's just still pulling quite a bit of attention. Hang in there, almost finished. All right, so after playing with this for about an hour, I just removed it. I just removed the call to action to create some new content. And I think this kind of makes sense because if you were going to post something, you could just move to the home feed and you would have a call to action right there in the feed, much like you do on Facebook, and the existing LinkedIn also doesn't have this. All things considered, after looking at this some more, it doesn't seem like we need any kind of call to action here visually and also functionally from the user's perspective. If you want to create a new post, you'd probably just click on home and you'd go straight home and you'd be presented with a dedicated call to action. This is what I would consider to be a really highly functional LinkedIn profile page. You can do everything that you would want to do, navigate throughout the site easily, switch between accounts, search the site comprehensively, and then when you're looking at an individual, you see all of the information that's relevant floated straight at the top, and then a whole bunch of just like featured content and contact details where they're relevant, some other sidebar call to actions here, a little bit about me, my work history, activity feed to see what this person's been up to. I think this is really clean. But of course, it only makes sense in context. You'd have to redesign the entire LinkedIn app to see if something like this would actually work once you get clicking around in it. So let me know what you think. Is this an improvement or could we have done better? And if you like this one, you'll probably also like the other LinkedIn redesign I did a year ago. I'll link that right here if you want to check it out. See you in the next one.